¿Qué pasó la última vez?
Tranquilo, esto es a prueba. Hubo miedo, pero también...
Fue una mala idea.
Jamás...
Greetings from Caption Media once again. Meg 2 The Trench will be the subject of this review's main discussion. Before providing you a review without major spoilers, let's first have a look at the box office figures. At the box office, Meg 2 The Trench is expected to make $20 to $30 million in its first weekend of release in the US and Canada in 3,500 theatres. An exciting thriller, Ben Wheatley's deep sea journey is serving as a follow-up to Meg, which was published in 2018 and is loosely based on Steve Elton's 1999 book, The Trench. 5 years after Jason Statham first battled a huge shark, Meg 2 The Trench makes its way to theatres with the promise of being a better film overall. Greater stakes, more crazy action set pieces, and more sea creatures than in The Meg. But sometimes bigger isn't better, as Meg 2 The Trench has some of the same flaws that earned The Meg such a depressing critical reception. While the first film introduced the titular Megalodon and the dangers it poses, the sequel expands the scope of the story by offering us fresh perspectives from which to solve brand new mysteries. It also features higher stakes and terrifying and heart-pounding action sequences. The film picks up 6 years after the events of the first movie. Scientists from the Oceanography Centre of Hainan were entrusted with continuing their investigation into the peculiar trench after discovering megalodons on the ocean floor beneath the thermocline. Naturally, the Manawan Research Centre has invested in creating electrically charged submarines and exoskeletons that enable divers to descend 25,000 feet into the ocean because megalodons remain a threat. To better understand the habits of the animal and increase human understanding of the mysteries buried in uncharted regions of the ocean, the Hainan Centre even raised their own baby megalodon. As the father of Mei Ying Zhang, played by Sophia Kai, a 14-year-old rebellious girl ready to explore the trench, Jonas Taylor, played by Statham, has fully accepted his position in the follow-up. Jonas now shares parental duties with Mei Ying's uncle, Wu Jing, plays this character, who has taken over the research centre because Su Yin Zhang, played by Li Bingbing, Mei Ying's mother, has been written out of the sequel. Although Jiu Ming is a long cry from the action hero Jonas is, she is presented as a co-protagonist in the follow-up, countering Statham's gloomy demeanour with a never-ending grin. A group of mercenaries in Meg 2 The Trench is led by the antagonist Montez, played by Sergio Perez Mencheta, who has connections to Jonas. Meg 2 The Trench's additional elements enhance the world of the first movie, while giving director Ben Wheatley ample leeway to develop a third instalment. Unfortunately, the film becomes bloated as a result of all the technology and human components, leading to a plot that veers off in too many directions at once. While Meg 2 The Trench is weaker than the first film in terms of action, with a perplexing closing act that bores more than it thrills, filmmaker Ben Wheatley is better fitted than the Meg's director John Turteltaub to transmit the thrills of the franchise's horror-focused sequences. Just as was the case in the first movie, Meg 2 The Trench dedicates the first half of its lengthy 160-minute runtime to sequences that are light on action but filled with undersea terrors. The concept of megalodons swimming free on the ocean floor is ripe for horror, serving as a spine-chilling reminder that deep waters remain unexplored. Since the unknown is such a significant source of fear, the existence of sea monsters has haunted our dreams for centuries. The Meg 2 taps into that dread to create adrenaline-inducing chase sequences in which Jonas and his allies must outsmart a predator they don't fully understand. Similar to the original film, Meg 2 The Trench spends the majority of its lengthy 116-minute runtime on scenes that are devoid of action but chock full of sea terror. Their world is altered dramatically since the first film, and the Manawan crew is now more accustomed to coping with megalodons. To instill fear in their hearts, Wheatley descends further down the trench, introducing more creatures and scenarios to torment Jonas. The lack of natural light in the trench can make it difficult for spectators to follow the attacks of these new monsters. At the same time, the lack of visibility heightens the character's predicament, heightening the tension of Meg 2 The Trench's horror-based passages. Since the first movie, Wheatley uses this opportunity to demonstrate how amazing this franchise could be if it stuck to horror. The script by John Hobart, Eric Hobart and Dean George Garis offers the ideal justification to explore the dark alien world of The Trench. On the other side, Meg 2 The Trench's conclusion is its weakest aspect. Meg 2 The Trench extensively utilises Statham's lengthy martial arts career to manufacture multiple fistfights that are intended to be exciting due to the appearance of human adversaries. However, Wheatley's close-up framing of these scenes and some excessive editing make the majority of the action boring and challenging to follow. It only gets worse when heroes, mercenary villains and aquatic creatures clash in the film's expansive final act. Meg 2 The Trench sadly makes the same error as the shark-punching extravaganza of the first movie by refusing to accept the campiness of its topic and instead attempting to make something serious out of it. With so many bits of unfinished business in the stunning conclusion, the sequel goes beyond its bounds. Meg 2 The Trench must find something for each supporting character to do as Jonas fights the Megalodons in their final stand, reveals the fate of the human adversaries and still enables the monsters to cause enough destruction for the audience to understand their terrible power. What comes next is a needlessly drawn-out action sequence that forces the viewer to pay attention to an excessive number of parallel and interconnected subplots. The worst human antagonists in recent memory are present in Meg 2 The Trench, which only serves to make matters worse. Nobody anticipates better results from a franchise that doesn't give its protagonists any real motivation to fight. However, Montez and his business associates are unexpectedly poorly written, detracting from the enjoyment of every scene in which they appear. They serve only to detract from the man versus beast spectacle in the third act, which may harm the sequel. Wheatley commits fully to the B-movie extravaganza, packing the film's duration of more than 2 hours with gushy horror mayhem and non-stop fun. The sequel recognises that it's a fiasco and calls it out. It's also one of the worst films ever, even by the low standards of stupid films about animal assaults. Along with depicting sharks and dinosaurs, the movie also takes an interesting diversion. It's an odd feeling to watch a movie's second half, which instead of making up for the weak first half, leans into the slick silliness of a summer shark movie. If the thought of seeing Jason Statham face off against ancient marine monsters has you hooked, then you must embrace the ludicrous. The film's brief moments of amusement are cloaked in a sea of explanation, idiotic story twists, and illogical underwater action. Here there is a strong sense that the director is having fun, which is maybe why the movie is so frequently humorous and occasionally delightful. The sequel battles a soggy narrative with amusing pulpiness, giving excellent summer fun despite factors that threaten to drag it down into the depths. It does surprise everyone by being fun, especially considering how low the bar may have been set. It starts out as a wonderfully pump-out creature feature time killer. It does, however, have some hilarious scenes, such as Statham jousting against megalodon sharks. This kind of situation makes you wonder why the sequel is still trying to invest in a blockbuster action setting when it would do much better as a pure horror or horror comedy. Last but not for least, the film doesn't really alter that much from the first movie in the franchise. It feels like a creature feature we've seen a billion times before, most likely on late-night cable television. It can only retain our interest for a few minutes before the channel switches to more interesting television programming. The action scenes in the movie have cluttered, hard-to-follow battles because of close-up framing and excessive editing. The conflict between man and beast is diminished by the presence of poorly written human antagonists. And again, I repeat that Meg 2 The Trench repeats a few of the shortcomings of its predecessor, such as a baffling third act that balls rather than thrills. The horror aspects of the movie capitalise on our natural aversion to the unknowable, creating tense chase scenes that pump up the pulse. The Meg 2 is a perfect example of what a movie might sound like if it was written entirely by artificial intelligence. Searching for a genuine innovation in Meg 2 is like asking Jason Statham to perform an American accent. It's equally dumb. The movie, like Jason Statham, knows what it's doing and succeeds on the level you're looking for. The mayhem and insanity in Wheatley's work is of a blandly cartoonish kind. It is neither genuinely frightening nor genuinely funny. The film lumbers through the water, attempting to be both a suspenseful thriller and a witty late-night summer work of escapism that might be so bad that it's good. Ultimately, I deem the movie to be listless and repetitious. It's a mediocre sequel with little tension, exciting thrills, or truly effective scares. This bloated, decomposing cinematic cadaver is beneath us. It gets a 5 out of 10 from me on the critic scale, but I would say you should watch this movie if you really like action adventure movies or you're a big Jason Statham fan. Please let us know if you enjoyed or disliked the film in the comments section. Subscribe to my channel. For additional information, ring the bell. Take care. Bye for now.
Es un ecosistema antiguo, totalmente virgen.
Yo...
Nadie había visto uno tan grande.
¡Vayan a la estación!